Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
This is Speak Up. I am Sandra Schulte. Welcome back to our show. I'm so glad to have Steve Cohen back with us. Remember, doesn't own the Mets. He isn't a magician, but he is a very intelligent, worthwhile lawyer. And he's going to tell us more about the Fair Claims Act as it has affected policemen, teachers, and others. Welcome back to our show.
Thank you for having me, Sandra. Nice to be here. Well, yeah, I wanted to chat with you a little bit about, because it affects all New Yorkers and affects people beyond New York, of a fascinating case that it's been in the press a little bit, that I'm lucky enough to be part of, but has implications way beyond the law. It's affecting policy, it's affecting healthcare, certainly affecting economics.
Wow.
And it's, for me, one of the most interesting cases I've ever been a part of. As you probably know, the New York City budget that was passed last week was $102 billion. That's a lot of money. And about $9.8 billion of it goes to health insurance.
Wow, 9.8.
Almost 10% of the entire city budget, and that's health insurance for employees, for retirees, and for their dependents. And that is actually ensconced in law, that the city has to pay for the health insurance of both employees, retirees, and dependents up to a certain level. And that level totals $9.8 billion last year. Well, the city decided about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that it wanted to try to save some money. Understandably, I don't know about you, I live in New York City. I'm a New York City taxpayer, and I would love to see some savings on health care. But the city decided, the de Blasio administration decided to do it on the backs of retirees and first responders, senior citizens. Only not even younger retirees.
On the backs of senior citizens.
Seniors, literally, senior citizens
who they felt
and first
would be less likely to defend themselves because of their age.
You're 100% right. They thought they were getting away with it because who are senior citizens going to turn to? Here is something I did not know until I was approached about representing this group of 250,000 retirees. Retirees who used to belong to a union, whether the police, firemen, the teachers, the professors, those unions, by law, cannot represent them after they retire.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that. Because the
Wow.
interests of the people who are currently working, who the union represents and is protected, that's their area that they can't, they're adverse to retirees. Very different sets of interests.
What I find very interesting is that retirees are paying the union.
Well,
dues.
voluntary, some of them are. And it's voluntary
Oh.
for retirees, and they get no vote. Even the ones who voluntarily, they get a calendar, they get, the police hand out the cards that saying, friend of the police, hopefully it'll help you if you get stopped for a traffic ticket, people think. Unions don't represent retirees. Black letter law. So the city decided, since they can't fight back, let's just change the insurance that they have. Now remember,
Interesting.
retirees, as our current employees of New York City, have a choice of 11 different insurance plans, depending on what your needs are. You don't mind an HMO, but you want vision care. You have prescription drug needs, but you don't care about something else. And retirees, too, have a choice of 10 different plans.
But you have one other choice. If you want to stay with the plan you had before, you can pay up.
Exactly. So the way for Medicare, now look, I have a Medicare plan. I'm on Medicare. I don't think anybody really understands Medicare. But to make it simple, these 250,000 retirees are all Medicare eligible. They're either over the age of 65 or they were disabled on the job, and therefore Medicare, they are eligible for Medicare. There's another 50,000 New York City retirees who are under the age of 65, but they're not affected by this. They just get their continued health plan. When Medicare was created back in the 60s, it was established that Medicare, the federal government, would pay for 80% of the cost of hospitalization and doctors. And the remaining 20% would be paid for by either the individual or an insurance policy that the individual or their company would buy on their behalf. And they were called Medicare supplemental plans. And it's a very simple plan. It's great. You pay for the insurance, and depending on how much you use it, Medicare paid the first 80% of every bill, and the supplemental plan the next 20%. And New York City has made that plan available to retirees for 40 years. 40 years. Now, it costs this year, 2022, about $200 per person per month for that insurance plan. Not inexpensive. When you have 250,000 people, that's a lot of money. And it adds up to almost $600 million a year that the city is paying for that insurance. And the federal government's paying most of the health care. So the city said, we're going to save that $600 million. And the way we're going to do that, said the de Blasio administration, is we're going to take all 250,000 people and say, thank you very much for your service. We're now putting you on something called a Medicare Advantage plan. Medicare Advantage plan sounds great. It's an advantage. Great marketing term. And it was created in the mid-1990s during the Clinton administration as an attempt to control healthcare costs. And it was going to be a public-private partnership. Federal government was going to provide the money and private insurance companies the administration. And the federal government would pay the private insurance companies about $1,000 per month per person. And that $1,000 would have to cover all of the medical expenses that you incurred. And obviously the thought was, if we do preventive care, if we encourage people to eat better, if we encourage them to get more exercise, the costs would be lower, the insurance companies would make money. In reality, people don't really eat better. They don't exercise more. They don't. And the insurance companies, because remember, they're getting a certain amount of money, they're getting $1,000 per month per person, said, well, it might be easier if we limit the medical care we approve, that we provide. And so they implemented something called prior authorization. And we're going to pay the doctors less also.
Right.
We're not going to reimburse them at the full Medicare rate. We're going to reimburse them at a slightly lower rate.
Which is the late rate as it is pretty.
It is. And so doctors, by the way, don't have to accept, they have to accept Medicare. If they accept one Medicare patient, they have to accept any Medicare patient. You don't have to accept Medicare at all if you're a doctor, but 99% of doctors do.
Except in New York.
Except in New York. They do not have to accept Medicare Advantage, which comes from the private insurance company, because the Medicare level is this, the private Medicare Advantage reimbursement is lower. So many doctors do not accept, many doctors do not accept Medicare Advantage. But the really biggest change is this thing called prior authorization. Insurance companies figured out that they are going to say, we're not so sure you need that medical procedure. We're going to make sure that's the best and most appropriate medical care for you. So doctors cannot simply prescribe a test or a procedure or a therapy for you without first getting prior authorization from the insurance company. And this is driving doctors nuts, because the insurance company often with someone who is not qualified, is saying stop getting in between the doctor and the patient, delaying and often denying the care. And the American Medical Association has been surveying doctors and studying this for the last 10 years and saying this is one of the biggest problems in healthcare today. I'll tell you a story. So what the de Blasio administration said is this new plan that we're going to move everybody to is a Medicare Advantage plan, and the reason they were doing it is that while the plan that they were paying $600 million a year for, called the supplemental plan, was paid for by the city government, Medicare Advantage, remember the $1,000 a month per person, is paid for entirely by the federal government. So the de Blasio administration said,
We'll
just
move 600,000 off the books.
we found, exactly, move it off the books. You got it. That was it. And they found $600 million.
Which
they
they
didn't
could
save
spend
it.
anything else on
But we're going to
something
spend it
else.
on something else.
Ah.
And the de Blasio administration was very good at that, at it's finding things to spend it on. Mrs. de Blasio was very good at finding
Yes.
things to spend things on. They didn't count on these retirees saying not so fast. And the retirees said not so fast for the two reasons. They didn't want to have to undergo prior authorization, which doesn't exist in traditional Medicare. Traditional Medicare, doctor says, get that test, you're there as soon as you can get an appointment.
And look who's approving it or not approving it. Somebody who is maybe making $15 an hour, who doesn't have training.
Right. And doesn't have special, and if they're a doctor, they don't even have the specialized training that they're making decisions on. So, and I'll give you the perfect example. And I testified at the city council last year when this was being proposed. And there were about 300 people in the room. And I said, I am probably the only person in this entire room who actually has a Medicare Advantage plan. I didn't know. Now I know better, and I'm going to switch it as soon as I can to a Medicare supplemental plan. But there are real disadvantages. And here's the saddest example that I can. 3 years ago, a man called me and said, I'm a retired New York City detective, and I want to tell you about my wife. She's 47. We have a 15-year-old son. And about 4 months ago, she had pain in her leg. So being a retired teacher, the responsible one, she goes to the doctor, who examines her, takes an x-ray, and says, I don't see anything. I want you to go get physical therapy. Since I don't know what's causing this problem, let's see if it's just muscle, or I want you to go physical therapy twice a week for 6 weeks. I want you to try Aleve. I want you to try hot compacts. I want you to try cold ice. But go to the physical therapy twice a week. That's important. And she does. She comes back after the 6 weeks and says, the pain is worse. He examines her again, does a second x-ray, says, I still don't see anything. I want you to have an MRI. And he picks up the phone to call the insurance company. And the insurance company representative says it's not medically necessary until she finishes 6 weeks of physical therapy. To which the doctor says, excuse me, not only had she finished the 6 weeks of physical therapy, it's in her medical record, you paid for it. You, the insurance company, had authorized it and paid for the 6 weeks of physical therapy. And the insurance company said, too bad, you don't like our decision, you can appeal. And he does. And the bureaucracy of the insurance company, it takes 38 days to appeal, and they reverse themselves, and she gets her MRI the next day. And what does the MRI show? Cancer, a sarcoma in her hip. And she goes right to Sloan Kettering, and they examine her, and they said, had you come to us, remember it took 38 days for the review, the reversal. That shouldn't have been a 38-day delay at all, because she'd done exactly what they had set up as the requirement for the MRI. The doctors at Sloan Kettering said, had you come to us a month sooner, we would have used just chemo to treat you. We're still going to use chemo. But first, we're going to amputate your leg, your hip, and your pelvis. And this poor woman endured that for 2 years until the cancer got spread and got to her. That amputation. because the insurance company said in its prior authorization protocol it wasn't medically necessary. So what we're looking at here, we go back to what the city retirees want. They say, we don't want to be subjected to situations like that. And we want to keep, look, we're older. We go to the doctor's office. We want to keep our doctors. Under Medicare Advantage, there's no guarantee you can keep your doctor because they don't have to accept it. And more than 10% of the doctors that retirees here in New York asked, are you going to participate in this new plan? More than 10% said no, we are not. So the lack of continuity of care was very, very scary for these retirees.
I know that most of the doctors I deal with in New York City, in Manhattan, will not accept Medicare.
Yeah.
Period.
It's Manhattan's a special place. Most places outside they do accept
Yes.
Medicare. So these retirees came to us last summer, and we sued New York City. And nobody told me you can't fight City Hall, or I didn't. When they did tell me, I
I'm
didn't
just
believe
curious,
them.
what retiree base came to you?
Individuals.
Uh-huh.
And beyond that, they not only, for us to get paid, and we had to get paid something, because this was going to take hundreds of thousands of hours of work, and we're a small firm. They did a GoFundMe, and we charged them a fraction of our normal rate. And they raised a lot of money, because there were 250,000. Now, 250,000 people did not contribute to the GoFundMe, but about 15,000 did. And 25 here and 50 there, and people said, I'm concerned about keeping my doctor and my health insurance. And they funded this lawsuit. And we sued.
How did the group of retirees know that this GoFundMe was?
Well, first of all, it wasn't a group to begin with. I got calls, multiple calls, from about, I think, 5 different retirees who knew about me because of where you started, the False Claims Act. I brought a False Claims Act 7 years ago against an insurance company, and it got a little bit of publicity. And when they looked up, who's willing to take on insurance companies, my name came up, and this was, but again, it was the False Claims Act that was the undergirding for all of this. And they called me, and many of them had never met each other. And I said to them, the way you could think about doing this is set up a nonprofit organization and elect a board and have real rules and have accounting and minutes and raise money. See if you can raise money, because I can't do it for free. This is not a pro bono. This is a thousands of hours endeavor. But we'll do it. We discounted our rates so dramatically, and even then I was feeling guilty of charging people, but we needed to keep the lights on. And they raised the money through a GoFundMe. And we brought what's known as an Article 78 proceeding against New York City.
Article 78 is a foil.
No, it's close to a foil, though. What an Article 78
Appellate?
is, the government has done something unauthorized or arbitrary and capricious. And we argued that the city's decision to shift all these people out of their existing health insurance plan to this new, much, much worse plan was arbitrary and capricious. And it was an abuse of their authority. And hearings went on for about 3 months. From, I guess, September, we got the final decision in March. And we won a preliminary injunction saying to the city, the court said, stop, you can't do this yet. We need more evidence, we need more hearings. It was the equivalent of a trial. It was in the form of a hearing, there's no jury, it was all judge. But we won the first round, and we won the first round, I think, in October, September, October, where the court imposed a preliminary injunction and said to the city, you can't do this. Stop the clock. And you're not going to force these people until we have the full hearing, and then I'll decide when I decide, said the Supreme Court.
But they have
judge.
done it anyway.
No, they haven't. We won. So we've won. Now, although we won the full case in March, and these people are guaranteed their health insurance at least through the end of the year, the city is appealing. and the city is appealing. Not surprisingly, because $600 because it costs the city $600 million a year. And if they think they could get that from the federal government, why not? Right? This is, but, so the city is appealing, we're opposing it. It won't be heard until the fall at the earliest. The papers are due late in the summer, the appellate briefs, and the appellate court here in Manhattan will schedule a hearing whenever they do. I wrote an op-ed for the Daily News. I don't know if it was just before or just after. I think it was just after we won. Because as I said, I'm a New York City taxpayer also. And if there is a way to save $600 million, I'm interested. And I told my clients, retirees, I'm going to write this article. And here's what I'm going to say. You can't force people. It's not legal, and it's not ethical, and it's not right to push these retirees into a plan that's much worse. But the city should create a better plan and make it voluntary.
But they claim anything is a better plan.
They put lipstick on a pig, is
Right.
what they did. And we proved in court, we proved to the judge's satisfaction, they were lying.
Yes.
That was the easy part. The hard part was the law, saying, does this law, a particular law that we were citing, apply? The factual stuff was great. And our clients were our secret weapon. We had all of these retirees who were passionate about this. And we were up against, I think the count, we were up against the New York City Law Department, which has 900 lawyers. We were up against Hogan Lovells, which has 1,200, and Strzok, which has 300. Those are the three law firms on the other side, and there were two of us, two people. My colleague, Jake Gardner from Walden Mocht, who I brought in. Jake is a smart lawyer and a good guy, and I brought him in as part of the team, not because he was at a great law firm. That was okay. Not the fact that he went to Stanford and Yale Law School. All right, I'm a little bit impressed. In between Stanford and Yale Law, he became a New York City fireman. That's why I wanted him. He had the perspective and he understood what these retirees were up against. Having spent the 3 years on the job, to me, made all the difference in the world. And, and he could relate to, many of our clients in ways that I couldn't. I never worked for the city government. I was never a fireman or a policeman. And he could. He walked the walk as well as talking the talk. So he was an enormous addition. And so what I said was, the city could do the right thing and still save money. And the right thing is they can build a better mousetrap. Remember I said that the cost of this supplemental plan that the city is paying in aggregate $600 million is $200 per month per person. What if they took a piece of that, $50 or $100 a month, and said, let's create a better Medicare Advantage plan that does tap the federal money, but doesn't have the disadvantages of not paying the doctors enough and not having prior authorization.
But how do you define not paying doctors enough?
So, they can pay more. The insurance companies aren't losing money.
They never
And,
do.
you don't have to be so greedy. You can do the right thing and reduce the profit margin a little bit. About 20 years ago, a book came out. I guess the book came out about 15 years ago, and it was about the insurance industry, and it relayed what was, it's not apocryphal. I believe it's a true story, though I've never seen the report itself. They hired McKinsey, and McKinsey wrote a report for one of the big insurance companies about how to improve its bottom line. And the report was entitled, as the book is entitled, Deny, Delay, and Defend. Deny the claim, delay paying it, and if you get sued, defend it. And that's so there are ways they can do the right thing. The profit margins won't be the same. The city won't save as much money. The insurance company won't make as much money to find a happy medium. Maybe that's wishful thinking. Maybe that's utopian. I think it's possible.
I think they need to have someone as an overseer, like yourself, to make it happen.
No, there's one other thing that I want to circle back.
Go
Prior
on.
authorization and the case with the amputated leg and hip.
Go on.
We actually represented the family in a lawsuit against the insurance company. And we lost. We lost at the first stage, which is called the motion to dismiss.
Yes.
And we lost because the federal judge, very smart federal judge, said, look, this is tragic, but I have to make this decision based not on the emotion, but on the law. And believe it or not, there is no law in New York State, and you use New York State law as the governing law, that holds insurance companies accountable when they commit medical malpractice or gross negligence. There's no law. There's a law that holds doctors, hospitals, nurses, dentists, podiatrists accountable if they make a mistake, but not insurance companies. And he dismissed the case. We lost. Now, we've appealed that decision to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. And we're hoping that the Court of Appeals has a different view of what, not about this. There is no statute. We agree. There's no statute, but there's case law. And the case law can be interpreted as to say, no, there isn't protection and a right to sue, or yes, there is. And we're hoping the appeals court takes a different view. And so that case is coming up in the fall as well. And, you know, we were keeping our fingers crossed for this poor family, not only for this poor family, but
for all of us.
For all of us.
Steve, I want to thank you so much. You have been so enlightening. You've been terrific.
Thank you for having me.
And again, how should people get a hold of you?
I'm Steve Cohen, not the Mets owner, not the magician. I'm a partner at Pollock Cohen here in New York City.
Spell Pollock.
Pollockcohen, and we're downtown in Manhattan. Steve Cohen.
Remember, Pollock is spelled Pollock.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This is great.
Until the next time, this is Speak Up. I am Sandra Schulte. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was fun.